I think this is going to be a spicy one. So let's see what happens. This is Charles calling in from the UK. Charles, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hello. Can you?
Hello. Yep, we can hear you just fine.
Nice. Yeah. Well, is my question like fair, or should I say it? I don't know how this works.
Well, I can read it if you want, because the call screener took it. You're asking what is morally wrong with incest, and also related to the moral dumbfounding and use of contraception.
Okay. So, do you want me to explain what moral dumbfounding is, or should I?
Yeah, I am curious about what you mean by that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm at university, and we had to study this thing called moral dumbfounding. And the general idea is a lot of people have moral intuitions, which they often can't justify, which are often almost like ingrained in us by evolution, by natural selection. So an idea is I'll create a thought experiment. So I'll be like, okay, Mark and Mary are brother and sister. They both go to the woods and they both have sex. And you have to assume this is true and always will be true. That A, they both use contraception. B, they don't tell anyone. And C, their bond of love is either positively affected or not at all. And then you're kind of asked, was this right or wrong? And most people go, oh, obviously that's wrong, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then when you really, really push them, they can't find reasons as to why, say, in that particular scenario, incest is wrong. And I was just wondering, because I didn't really have a good enough answer myself, but I was just wondering why you thought incest might be wrong in certain instances. Because some people, the most common response is often, well, the children will get fucked up with incest. But then, as long as they carried on using contraception, I don't find that a very convincing answer. Mm-hmm. So I was just wondering what you guys had to say about that.
Yeah, Charles, this is a fascinating thing to talk about because it hits on a couple different things here. One of them being concepts of morality, concepts of ethics, and what we actually mean when we say those things. And I find that even people in the secular community, when they talk about ethics, they don't talk about it in a way that's personally satisfying to me, because I do think that it's one of the harder things to talk about when you sort of lose your God belief. And I don't know that this isn't exactly related, but when you do have a God belief, it's kind of simple. It's whatever God says or whatever the Bible says, or your cultural interpretation of what the Bible says, that's what you should do. And so it's kind of simple. It's just kind of a checklist thing. But when you kind of deconstruct all that and you realize, oh, the people do things because they want to do it or they don't want to do it, that's kind of all the world really is. Now, people can intellectualize their reasoning and they can come up with principles that they may find sound and may be consistent. But as far as the deep-seated reasons to why or why not, it ultimately comes down to personal motivation. I am personally motivated to follow a sense of ethics that convinces me to commit to the least amount of suffering as possible. But if I told people, why do I do that? It's really just because I want to. I don't know of any reason to say outside of that. So, and that's a hard thing to hear. Maybe there are some people who are really, knowledgeable in ethics that would disagree with me, because obviously that's one take. And a lot of people in our community have different takes on what morality is at the end of the day. But when it comes to incest, it has to be a thing where, as a collective, as a society, do we want to see that or not? And yeah, what about a relationship that doesn't bring about children? What do you do with that? I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. I can point to, we have psychological aversions to wanting to have sex with our immediate kinship groups because of the Westmeric effect, or because, there's things in our biology, but that doesn't explain morality, right? That's just using an appeal to nature. So we can't always go that route. You really have to appeal to more abstract concepts. Maybe you could make a utilitarian argument. Maybe you could make, some sort of consequentialist thing. I'm not sure. Personally, I have, if you look at YouTube channels like Soft White Underbelly that document what incest families or families of that are the product of incest go through, they're typically of low income. They're typically of low education, and they're typically are victims themselves of sexual abuse. So there's a lot of that stuff to consider that would personally make me be convinced that outlawing that sort of kind of relationship is good for society as a whole. But there might be people who could argue against that. I don't know, but it's very, very complicated, and that's sort of my complicated take on that. Forrest, I see you've got your thinking face on. What do you think?
I'm trying to look at this from every conceivable angle here.
Yeah,
like, I'm trying to really break this because, like, right off the bat, like I understand that you're speaking in like a hypothetical, like perfect world where everything goes properly. Because you can say, oh, they're going to use contraception. Well, contraception doesn't work a lot of the time, and is that worth the risk of bringing in a life of someone who is now damaged because of your actions? That's but assume that that's not an option. Maybe they're both sterile or something. Whatever. There's also psychological issues there amongst the people themselves. That can be a dynamic depending on like sibling age and rivalry and upbringing and things like that could potentially produce like this kind of dynamic of power. It's the same reason why, even if it's consensual, prison guard can't have sex with a prisoner, because that is inherently rape no matter what. And so if you have this kind of power dynamic of growing up together, let's say that they're twins, that perfect in every way, completely raised the exact same, never had that. There's still an issue of that deep familiarity.
Cousins that were familiar with each
other. Or something like that. There's still that issue of familiarity that can be a problem. Honestly, it's a big old bag of weird, of like problems.
I have to imagine here for us. Go ahead, Charles.
I can just quickly some other examples. So, like, what's fascinating about moral dumbfounding is it not only pertains to things like our intuitions concerning incest, but also to like, so Jonathan Haidt, who you might have heard of, is the guy who coined a lot of this literature.
Right.
And
author of Thinking Fast and Slow and other great books. Yeah.
And then he uses another example, which is like, you have a pet dog, your dog gets run over, and then like the daughter or something just eats the pet dog, and then it's like, oh, poor Dorothy the dog, she's now been eaten or whatever. And most people will be like, oh my God, that's obviously wrong. And then you're like, well, why not? The dog's dead. Like, it's not going to do anything.
Sure.
And it's weird because when you point out that there's a lot of things like that I have a lot easier of a time jumping on than incest.
Yeah, because I have to imagine there are two consenting adults that are in an incestual relationship listening to this show right now. What would I say to them? Do I say, no, you can't do this? Am I of the moral authority? Do I have enough backing to say that? And I want to say yes. I want to say, like, yeah, there's issues that are involved with this, but it's not like, it's not as it's not as hard hitting as it is for other issues. You know what I mean? Because we are talking about adults making decisions for themselves. But if it does involve the like you said, products of relationship dynamics that aren't healthy, or issues with potential offspring, that immediately complicates things, right? And that's what makes me lean towards the side of this shouldn't be acceptable. But yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. You're right. There is a more people. I imagine if you ask the average person, they wouldn't give very satisfying answers on this.
It's one of those things, like the trolley problem. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's rough. Huh.
Exactly.
Well,
great. Interesting thought experiment, Charles. Thank you.
Oh, I couldn't personally think of a satisfying answer, so I just concluded in some instances it might actually be fine, much as my intuitions rebel against that notion. Like, as much as I kind of, want to say incest is wrong in all cases, there might be like a minute, as you said, like there might be instances where they're sterile, and I can't really come up with a good enough reason as to say why that's unequivocally wrong. But I don't like that.
I've never had to think about this before, but now it's what I'm going to be thinking about for a minute.
There you go.
This around my head.
There you go, Charles. You got him thinking. You got him thinking with that big brain of his. So good job on that, Charles. Well, I appreciate your time and thank you. Go ahead, real quick.
I was also with the example of the dog. What's wrong with eating your own pet dog once it's died? Like that was another one. I was kind of like, oh, I have no idea how to even go about answering.
Yeah, if you're not religious, right? If you don't think that there's something sacred about the body, I think that's what a religious person would say, that there's some sort of moral ramifications, especially in ancient cultures. But maybe that belief was a byproduct of our evolution trying to tell us not to eat things that could potentially harm us, right? Because you could definitely get some diseases there from doing that if it's a human that you're eating, right? Yeah, it's also a weird one there too. You're absolutely right.
See, and that one I have a lot more truck with. I can very easily be like, yeah, no, I'll eat a dog. I don't care. That's fine. It's, whatever. I have no issue with that. And because like as a biologist, I see everything as just the same kind of sack of meat. And so like it's like, bro, man, that one's easier than the other one. I wish you would have opened with that. We would have
right. Yeah, for sure. Well, Charles, that is all the time that we have for this particular call. But thanks again so much for talking to us and asking a very thought-provoking question. I'll be curious to see what people in the comments have to say about that one, because it's not as like you think it's simple, but it's not. It's really not.
Yeah,
it's a little more complicated.
That's cool. That's the coolest thing is you expect it to be just like a hard line, but no. Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah, for sure.